want you to know what an honor it is for me to stand in your presence. I celebrate what you've created here. Every Sunday, most every Sunday, I'm traveling around the country speaking at a Unity or Science of Mind Center. And what you have created here is special. How many of you have not heard me speak before? Raise your hand. Well, have fun. If I was talking to you one-on-one, first thing I'd do is find out what books have you read? What trainings have you taken? What words and concepts are you familiar with as we explore this idea of being God in form? And then we could do this whole thing based on the words you're familiar with, the concepts you're used to. But since I'm up here and I'm going to take about 25 minutes or a tad bit more, I may say something that's different than you're used to. I might quote scripture or do something that's a little different. And all I would ask is if we run into a place where there's a little difference, please look past it. Because I guarantee you my sole intention this morning is to remind each of us how absolutely magnificent and powerful we are right now. Now with that, when there's this many people who haven't heard me speak before, I'm going to tell you a little about how I got into this marvelous philosophy we call unity. What I call the practical application of the teachings of Jesus. When I was 23, I was working construction in the summer between college semesters, hurt my back. A year later, I had a spinal fusion. During surgery, my spine got infected with the E. coli bacteria. E. coli is a bad bug. A year later, by then I'd been transferred to the University of Washington Medical Center because my primary care physician, the orthopedic guy, said, look, this is way out of my league. He'd done 4 surgeries to get rid of the infection because with E. coli, there's not a good antibiotic. This was over 40 years ago. And he said, we just need to go in and cut it out. So he'd tried it 4 times, and every time he went in, it was worse. So he transferred me to the University of Washington Medical Center in Seattle, where I lived. I went in there and became, within a couple days, a real celebrity. I had the worst case of osteomyelitis of the spine they'd ever seen. My doctor became this visiting professor from England. He was supposed to be one of the top 5 orthopedic surgeons in the whole world. The other professors didn't talk like that, but the interns and residents did. He was kind of standoffish, and he said, look, with E. coli, there's not a good antibiotic. So I'm going to just go in and cut it out, which they tried before. And he said, but I don't want to be blindsided when we go in, so I want to do tests. So they did tests every day. For 2 weeks, they did tests. They poked me in places I didn't even know I had places. Finally, he came in one afternoon. He said, we got good x-rays. I know the extent of this infection. It's more involved than I ever imagined. I'm going to have a meeting with tomorrow with some other specialists, and after this meeting, we'll come in and tell you what we're going to do, and the next day we'll do this debridement, cutting out procedure. And he left. And after he wrote up his report, everybody changed. The nurses changed. When they came in, they were different into my room. When my wife came that afternoon, she said, what's going on? I said, what do you mean? She says, everybody's different. It's like they won't even look at me. I said, I don't know. The next day, and then there was more drama. Next day, we waited for this meeting, my wife and my 2-year-old daughter. 5 o'clock came and went, nobody showed up, which really surprised me because my doctors are all professors, and usually professors go home at 5. 6 o'clock came and went, 7 o'clock came and went. Finally, 8:15, door to my private room opened up, and in walked 6 surgeons. 6. And if it's good news, there's usually one person to tell you. Guy in the lead was this orthopedic guy from England. Behind him, the head of the Department of General Surgery. Behind him, the head of the Department of Infectious Disease. Behind them, the 3 top residents. And this is what they said. This infection has spread. It's throughout your spine. It goes up mid-spine all the way down to your tailbone. It followed both your sciatic nerves into your thighs. The E. coli has eaten holes in your colon, so the germs are communicating back and forth. It's throughout your pelvic area and throughout your abdomen. And if we don't stop it now, you will die. Doctors don't say that. What they say is, it has now become life-threatening. Which means, if we don't stop it now, you will die. And he said, so tomorrow we're going to do the most radical debridement we've ever attempted. We're going to take you down to the operating theater, and the general surgeons are going to start from the front. They're going to start as low as they can go down here in your pelvic area or up around your belly button, and we're going to go almost up to your sternum. We're going to open all of that up, cut out all the infected tissue, separate your organs out of the way, and when we get onto the spine, the orthopedic surgeons will chisel and scrape the infection out of your spine. When we're done with that, we're going to roll you over, and the orthopedic surgeons are going to start as low as they can go down here between your buttocks. We're going to come up mid-back. We're going to open all that up, cut out all the infected tissue, chisel and scrape the infection out of your spine. They went into a lot more detail than I'm giving you. When we're done with that, 2 teams of surgeons are going to start at your belt line and open up both your buttocks and follow your sciatic nerves into your thighs. And when we're done with that, we're going to tip you up on the end and come in from the bottom. He got about 5 minutes into that, and I just started shaking. My wife came over on one side and was holding me. The head nurse was on the other side holding me, and I just laid there and looked at him. My body knew what they were going to do. They were going to gut me like a dead deer. Finally got done, and he sat down on a chair and pulled it up next to my bed and reached out and took my hand. And that's when I knew I was in trouble, because this guy was not a touchy-feely doctor. And he looked at my face and he said, I know how radical this must seem, but we've got to do this. And he said, when we're done with the debridement, when we're done with the drains and the antibiotics that we do have, we're pretty sure we can stop this infection from spreading anymore. The bad news is we can guarantee we can almost guarantee you're going to lose the use of your left leg through nerve damage. And then he just looked at me. And I just looked at him. And he just looked at me, and finally I thought it must be my turn to say something, and I heard come out of my own mouth, that's okay. That's okay. If we've got to do this, let's just get it over with. I want it done. But even as those words came out of my mouth, I thought, what has happened to me? What has happened that in just 1 year, I would so willingly give up the use of my left leg? But I no sooner said that than he reached up with his other hand and clamped mine between his, and he said, son, we have to do this. The bad news is if it's as extensive as we think it is, there's a good chance you will also lose some of the mobility of your right leg. You're probably going to lose the control of your bowels and your bladder. And there's a very good chance you're going to end up sexually impotent. I was 24. When they left, the resident who'd been with me for the 2 weeks of tests, because we'd become friends. He wasn't that much older than me. He had a daughter. I had a daughter. We'd become friends. He sat on my bed and he held me with my wife. He just held me. He didn't say anything. He just held me. And then he said, Terry, we don't know what's going to happen. That's why we were in a meeting for over 4 hours. We've never seen anything like this. But what we do know is you cannot expect to come out of this one whole. The name of my book is The Hell I Can't. I invite you I invite you this morning to get underneath the words that I use, get underneath the concepts. If I say something different than you're used to it, please look past it. Because when I talk to you about your absolute authority on this physical plane to create any reality that you want, when I talk to you about all things are possible if only you believe they are, this isn't just theory for me. They went in the next day, and when they opened up the pelvic area, the lower end of my colon was just, they said there weren't any holes in it. It was like a sieve. So they pulled my bowels out and clipped them and sewed the two ends of my abdomen. Said, you're going to go to the bathroom in a plastic bag the rest of your life. A month later, they did that big surgery. I was on the table for 13 and a half hours, took 27 units of blood, and they quit before they were done. I could go on and on. I had that infection for 11 years. I had 27 major surgical procedures on my spine and abdomen. I got letters from some of the finest doctors in the world to the insurance company saying what Terry McBride has is not curable. He will be left with significant permanent disability. And the lower end of his colon has been so involved with the E. coli infection, it cannot heal. I'm going to be 69 in November, and I don't have a bad back. I'm not recovering from a bad back. I haven't learned to live within my human limitations, and I took the prayer they gave me that said I needed to accept the things I could not change and put it in the trash and put a new one up that said, with God, all things are possible. I sure get energized when I'm with a group of people like you. These principles we teach in unity are not smoke and mirrors with me. You have absolute authority on this physical plane. That's what Jesus brought to the human race. But I'm not going to talk about how to use these principles to heal a disease, and certainly you can do that. I'm not going to talk about how to use these principles to create the results you want. And certainly you can do that because, listen to me, unity is not about enduring conditions. Unity is about changing conditions. Unity is not about accepting the things you cannot change. Unity is about changing all things because you're God expressing uniquely as woman. God expressing uniquely as man. Today I want to talk about the mystical history of unity. Because of that background, as I've been studying for these 45 years in teaching, my focus has always been, how do you grow corn with this stuff? How do you use it? I never was very concerned. Even in my young 20s, I wasn't studying this stuff so when I died I could go to a better place. I studied this stuff so this would become the better place. That's what Jesus meant when he said, behold, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's right here. As I look at the various traditions I've studied over the years, when I look at the mystical history of unity, for me it starts with the Hindu faith. Hindu faith is the oldest living religion. It's been around about 6,000 years. At first, when I started studying the Hindu traditions, it seemed really confusing. They got a God for everything. But then as I began to understand what they were getting at, the foundation for the Hindu teachings is everybody's different. And so they have various aspects of their teachings to relate to the differences. If you're a farmer, they got a God, they got a statue of a God whose sole purpose is to help farmers grow corn. And the whole purpose of that is so that individuals, based on their priorities, can have a God they relate to. And then as they develop this relationship, if you will, with the God that helps them grow corn, they broaden out. If you're a woman and you're moving into childbearing age, you want to have a family, they got a God that's just to help you get pregnant. And they got a statue of this God so that you can begin, based on your priorities and your aspirations, you can begin to relate to this holy presence. And then as one evolves and moves in their life, they begin to understand that these various aspects are just various faces of the one God. In the Hindu tradition, As you move up through it, you move into the mystical teachings of Hinduism. But like so many of the mystical teachings in the old days, you couldn't go study those mystical teachings unless you were born of the right caste system. You couldn't go study those mystical teachings if you were a woman. You had to be a male. You couldn't go study those mystical teachings unless you knew all the secret handshakes and had done all the stuff before so that you could, whatever it was. It was a very select group. But if you could get in to study it, this is what they taught. This is out of a book called The Magic and Mysticism of India. In the Hindu teachings, it is held that there exists a universal mental principle which is known as creative mind. Its essence and elementary character may be described as being something like the blending or combination of one's will and one's imagination, and that each individual is possessed of a portion of this creative mind. Notice the affirmation we did this morning. There is only one mind, one power, one presence that permeates all of creation. As I turn within, I feel the connection with this one presence. This is not new with us. It's in all the great mystical teachings. And then it goes further in the Hindu teachings. In other words, the Hindu teachings hold that this creative mind that you have, when developed enough, when disciplined enough, has the power of materializing physical creation directly itself without the need for physical activity. Pick up your bed and walk. Be ye cleansed. If you're having a party out in the backyard and the caterers don't show up, you just multiply the loaves and fishes. You're having a celebration and you run out of wine, you don't need to go to 7-Eleven, you just change. Anyway, I'm kidding. That the Hindu teachings hold that this creative mind that we have can be disciplined enough so that we can materialize physical creation without the need for physical labor. And it says the achievement of this is said to be part of our mental inheritance and can be used when we develop and discipline our mind enough to make use of this God-like ability. This, within the Hindu teachings, it holds that there is one universal mind and you have an aspect of that mind, and if you learn to discipline your mind enough, you can do even greater works. The Hindu teachings. The next in the lineage for me, and I know the Buddhist philosophy comes in there and we believe there are many paths to God, but I'm talking about the paths that says you have the right and the authority to use your mind to create anything you want. And some of the other philosophies say you need to give up your attachment to the outcome. Jesus never said give up your attachment to the outcome. The next for me became the Jewish faith. The Jewish faith started by a guy named Abraham or Abram, depending on, and he grew up in a town where it was a center of trade, so there were all kinds of gods. It wasn't just the Hindus had various aspects of the God. There were actually a whole bunch of different religions. He woke up one day and said, you know what, there isn't a whole bunch of gods, there's only one God, monotheistic. And that God is the creator of all things. And out of that started the Jewish faith, the 12 tribes of Israel. Like most traditions, in the beginning with any faith, what comes are all the rules. You got to do this, you got to do this, you got to hold your palms up so you can be receptive, have your feet flat on the floor so the energy from Mother Earth can flow up through you, all the rules. But as the Jewish faith evolved, what moved into prominence was, or not prominence, but what was available was the mystical teachings within Judaism, which is usually held to be embodied in the Kabbalah. And in the Kabbalah, the whole purpose of these mystical teachings, this is a brief summary, boy, don't come up after and tell me I was wrong or missed something. But the whole purpose of these mystical teachings in Judaism was to heal the apparent separation when we came to earth. The Jews have a belief that when we were with God and then we just chose to come in here, and so when we did that, we separated our spirit from God. It's the original sin kind of thing that's in a whole bunch of the different faiths, that we fell from grace, that thing. And so the whole purpose of the Kabbalah is to teach a thing they call Kovana, K-O-V-A-N-A-H. And what that means is mystical intention in prayer. is what you described this morning. What Myrtle came up with was what she called affirmative prayer. The mystics in Judaism would call it mystical intention in prayer. And the whole purpose of this ability to use your mind in prayer was to heal this spiritual separation. And then along came a guy named Isaac Luria, who's credited as being one of the 3 most influential teachers in the history of the Kabbalah. And when it gets to Luria, in a book called The Major Trends in Jewish Mysticism by Gershom Shalom, it says this: but the doctrine of mystical intention in prayer does not stop there for Luria, for he took the whole school of thought in classical Kabbalism and he merely developed it further. And mystical intention in prayer for Luria stood directly on the borderline between traditional mysticism and magic. Now, when they use the word magic in the old days, they're not talking sleight of hand. If you use these mental principles on your spiritual needs, it was called something. If you use these spiritual principles on your human needs and your human aspirations, it was called magic. And when he brought that to the party, there was this big brouhaha. Oh no, you can't use this for your, you can only use it here. You can't use it here, you can't use it there. We do that today, There's a power for good in the universe, and you can use it, but you can't use it for your ego-centered desires. You can't manipulate other people, although, like I said, Jesus raised three people from the dead. He never asked any of them whether they wanted to come back. So there was this big brouhaha. In that book, Major Trends in Jewish Mysticism, the author says, I have met men in Jerusalem to this day who practice mystical intention in prayer as Luria taught it. And none of these men, notice, men, would deny that the inner intention in prayer is easily capable of being externalized as magic. And then he says, but they have evolved. And then he says, no, perhaps I should say they've inherited a system of spiritual practice where the center of gravity is on spiritual needs rather than physical needs. So again, there's this separation. It's a separation, your spirit's holy, but your human nature is weak, and it'll always lead. It's that whole idea. As the Jewish faith evolved about 4,000 years ago or so, up came the various, what I call the mystery schools. Because the universe was beginning, if you will, to be ready to take these teachings to the street. And so up came the ancient mystery schools, the Druids in the United Kingdom area, the Essenes in the Middle East, the Magi in Persia, the School of Isis for women in Egypt. And like today, these different mystery schools taught different paths. The idea was to get to the same place, to know the truth, but they taught different. For me, the Druids taught how to take this energy of life and bring it inside and then step forth with a mighty faith. And I read it and I see, boy, it seems like they're always angry. Or that's my take. The Essenes taught how to use prayer and meditation, and that the Magi taught how to use mind to create form. And that's why they were called the Magi, because what they taught was how to do magic. About this time that these guys were coming along, up comes a writer named Moses Ben Malman, who is he's a Hebrew scholar. He's not a Jewish scholar. He's not a scholar of the Jewish tradition and dogma. He's a Hebrew scholar, the scholar of the language. And he wrote a book called A Guide for the Perplexed. Sounds like a book we could use today. And he opens his book with this. He goes on to explain that the phrase, let us make man in our image, signifies not a physical likeness, but an intellectual likeness. The mind of God is my mind. But still, this stuff was only available to a select few, because you couldn't get into the mystery schools unless you were invited, unless you couldn't get in to study the Kabbalah, I don't know if I mentioned, unless you had Jewish heritage for 5 generations back on both sides of the family, and of course you had to be male. And then it is said that these leaders of all of these different traditions The top leaders were all connected at some level. You know, that whole idea that your mind and my mind know what, and they decided it was time to take these secret teachings to the world. And so in the mystical writings, it talks about 3,500, 3,000, 3,200 years ago, a call went out, if you will, look past the words. A call went out to an ascended master who would be willing to come again and take these teachings to the world. And symbolically, Jesus is supposed to represent that ascended master. I'm not talking about, does that mean he wasn't the only begotten Son of the living God and whether he's a virgin born? I'm not going there. I'm talking about if you study the mystical writings, there's this thread of truth that runs through and ends with the birth of Jesus. And in the original Greek writings of the Old Testament, in the original Greek, the guys that come to visit Jesus at his birth are not called the three wise men. In the original Greek, they're called the masters of magi. And the mystical significance is that these masters of magi from three different places in Persia showed up to Jesus' birth to do one thing, to acknowledge that this is the person who will take these teachings to the world. And like most religions, when the Christian faith started, it got caught up in the dogma, in the traditions. We're right, they're wrong, and then the Council of Nicaea, and no. And now, 2,000 years later, up comes Myrtle Fillmore. And what she discovered. And then Charles was so enamored with that, he went and started studying. And what they put together was the teachings of unity. In other words, the practical application of the teachings of Jesus. What this church is about is that declaration. We come here together to empower each other, to show each other how to use these tools. And what I love about unity is it's about your priorities. What I love about unity, it's about your aspirations. Why? Because Steve Boland trusts who you are. When I first got into this stuff, when I decided it's time to quit reading the books and start to apply it, I did not believe I could ever get well. They told me the chances of me getting well were 1,000,000 to 1. I would need a miracle. I didn't start using these principles to get well. I started using these principles to what was right in front of me. I started using these principles so I wouldn't cry myself to sleep every night. See, what is offered you here are these principles to use, not just to think about, but to use. So you use them wherever you are. And when you demonstrate your ability to make a difference, when you demonstrate your ability to create reality, you get feedback through your own senses that I made a difference. As you continue to use them, what you get is, wow, what I can do makes a pretty big difference. And as you continue to use them and demonstrate, not just theory, but demonstrate them, ultimately what you get to is what I do makes the difference. Of course, if you say that to people out there, they'll go, who do you think you are? And it doesn't always work, especially in Texas, to look them in the eye and say, I think I'm the Christ. But that's what we teach. Unity is not about your potential. It's about your truth. Your God expressing uniquely as woman. Your God expressing uniquely as man. That's the truth that sets you free. And what does it set you free from? The lie of human limitations. The lie of human limitations. We don't sit here and say, with God, all things are possible, except you can't do this, and you can't do this, and you can't do this, and it's got to be this, and it's got to be this. Some teachers do it. Steve Boland will not. That's why I acknowledged you for what you've created here. This center is an answer to your prayer. This center And what you teach, what you bring to each other, what you support each other every Sunday in knowing is the answer to the prayer the world has been praying. And you get to use it wherever you are. Can you remember the first time you created a parking place? You have a friend that always did parking places, and finally one day said, how did you do that? Well, I get there, and before I get there, I go do my, if I'm at Unity, I go do my affirmative prayer. If I'm at Science of Mind, I say, I go do my spiritual mind treatment. If I'm just talking to my friends, I say, I go do my woo-woo. So you're on the way to this place, you think, well, I'm going to give it a try. So you did what you did. You're sitting at the light, it's red, and you want to park in the next block, and everybody's looking for a parking place, and you're going, I'm just going to hold as best I can. And the light turned green, you start across the road, all of a sudden somebody starts running from one of the buildings towards the car, and you stop and you say, maybe. And sure enough, they get in their car and pull out, and when you pull in, you go, this stuff works. That's what this is about. That's what demonstration is about. You can only know as much as you demonstrate. This stuff works. And then the next want comes up. Use the principles on that. That's what Jesus is talking about when he said pray unceasingly. I don't think it's one of these things on your knees. It's about as you move through your life, speak your word. The universe awaits your command. So the next want comes up. Use the principles on that. And when that happens, you get that experience again. Wow, it happened again. The next want comes up. Use the principles on that. About the third or fourth time it happens in a row, there's a shift in the mind. And the shift is sort of like, I'm on a hot streak. Or everything's working together for good in my life. And I don't mean that as an affirmation when your life's going down the toilet. I mean you experience that. Everything is working together for good. That's where most of us quit using the tools. What Steve Bolin and your staff here call you to do is use the tools even when you're on a hot streak. Continue to use them. And what happens is I think you move into what I call the state of grace. It can be difficult because there are so many books written about the state of grace that say that you need to leave your priorities at the door. You need to leave your aspirations at the door. No, you don't. Jesus said all things are possible. Take your priorities even into the state of grace and use these tools. And there will come a time in your life when you can look in a mirror at a body that's 69 years old, that's perfectly healthy with no pain, no residual effect, no colostomy, nothing. And what you look in the mirror and say, who must I be to have been able to create this reality? This is what awaits you. When you use these principles, your life becomes this glorious adventure. And there can be pitfalls. I certainly had some. But there comes a time when you say, who must I be for my life to be this glorious? And the answer comes, my beloved son, in whom I'm well pleased. My beloved daughter. We find our relationship to God through the quality of our human existence. That's what Jesus brought to the human race. He didn't bring how to have an out-of-body experience of being one with God. He brought how to have an in-body experience of being one with God, to be able to see your own children born and grow. Who must I be to have created this? You and I stand on a threshold where very few people have ever been. And that threshold is owning that we right now are the physical embodiment of God. That's what it means. When Charles Fillmore said on page 71 of the Unity Treasure Chest, he's talking about, so how do we do this? Where do we begin? And our founder says, our co-founder, the way to begin is the way Jesus did it. He acknowledged himself to be the Son of God. The attainment of Christ's consciousness calls for nothing less on our part than a definite recognition of ourselves as the sons and daughters of God, right here, right now, regardless of appearances to the contrary. And I know what it's like to not be able to own that. I know what it's like to have so much pain, so much anguish about tomorrow, so much fear that I couldn't own that. I also know what it's like to have a chaplain who would sit and pray with me. And when I would say that, they'd say, if you can't know it for you, know that I can know it for you. You're not alone. What you have created in this ministry is a place where you can come together with your sisters and brothers and explore these ideas that have been talked about for centuries. And as you begin to use them in your life and demonstrate based on your priorities, I remember when my biggest priority was I just want to go to the bathroom the way I used to go to the bathroom instead of in a plastic bag. And other people said, that's just your ego. Get involved. Owning these principles is more than just showing up on Sunday. And Sundays are wonderful here. Owning these principles, that's what the classes are about. That's what the Unity curriculum is about. If you take a look at what's available in this center, it just goes on and on, page to page, page to page. You've got this big Be the Change conference coming up next weekend, a fire walk, and then it moves through it. What that conference is about is assisting you to understand your power. They've got the workshop starting called Metaphysics 2, the basic Unity principles. I know people who've taken that 4 times because every time they go into it, they get deeper. They've got volunteers here. If you're new and you want to feel more like part of the family, be a greeter. You only have to commit for a couple weeks. You show up, you talk to people, you love on them when they come in, and what you'll find is they already think you're family. You want to get involved, but you're not sure where, but you like cooking, get involved in the hospitality, get involved in the grounds program. There is so much here for you to get involved in based on your priorities. And the whole purpose is that when you get involved, you can understand how to use these principles to make your dreams come true. And I'll tell you something. Until we individually can make our dreams come true, we'll just keep praying for world peace. But when you and I, as individuals and as a group, begin to realize and understand how to use these to make our dreams come true, we'll stop praying for world peace and we'll create world peace. I don't know what your priorities are. I don't know what your priorities are. My bet is there are a bunch of people in this room who don't even know what their priorities are anymore because they've been so involved with teachers telling them this isn't about what you want, this is about what God wants. You can't even say that unless you come from that you're separate from God. Your mind is the mind of God. And I invite you to step from this Sunday with a new determination, a new commitment to make your dreams come true. Because when you do that, what you will get an experience of is a facet of self that's even bigger than your dreams. Remember, all things are possible. As Charles Fillmore says on page 98 of the Unity Treasure Chest, Jesus did not claim to have exclusive use of the supernatural power he used. This is the founder of Unity telling you you have the right and the authority to use God's power in your life. He knew that others could do what he did if they would only try, and he encouraged his followers to use the power of faith. He encouraged his followers to use the power of thought. For after all, it was our brother who said, "The works that I do shall ye do also." and even greater works than these shall ye do. Get involved. Make your dreams come true.